This podcast is for informational purposes only. Personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and not legal advice, neither health, tax, nor professional, nor official statements by their organizations. Guest views may not be those of the host. Hello, and welcome to AI or Not, the podcast where business leaders from around the globe share wisdom and insights that are needed now to address issues and guide success in your artificial intelligence and digital transformation journey. I am Pamela Isom, and I am your podcast host. So, I always have special guests. So we have another one today. My special guest today is Leonard Lee. Leonard is an executive analyst and founder of nextCurve. He's a tech industry advisor and thought leader. He has his own podcast, so much more that I'm going to allow Leonard to elaborate because I probably won't get it right. So Leonard, welcome to AI or Not, and please expound upon your career journey and where you are headed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pamela, for having me. I might not even get it right myself. Yeah, I've been around for a really long time. I started my career in developing database applications way back in the day, around the time where ERPs were really hot. And since I've had a long journey, I was a partner principal at E&Y, PwC, IBM, and I've worked across a number of different industries, across a number of, let's call it disciplines and domains, from custom app development to CIO advisory to corporate strategy stuff, and then, I was with Gartner for 3 years as a managing partner with their tech, media, and telecoms practice. And so I had a stint as a industry analyst, consultant, and I started my own firm about 7 years ago, nextCurve, to really leverage and capitalize on my experience, my broad experience, that's both technical, business, and strategy, for the benefit of my clients who I serve today. Many of my clients are some of the leading technology companies that you see out there in the headlines every day. And, I'm having a blast working with them on some of their very, very critical and top priorities. So it's really fun. And it's really great to be on your show. And I look forward to our chat.
Well, congratulations on your success, because I know you've had a pretty successful journey, so that's a good thing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy. That's all that counts, actually. Regardless of how people perceive success, I'm happy. So
I'm glad that you're happy. Yeah. I'm glad that you're a good role model. You're a great role model. So as you know, you mentioned Gartner. So I want to ask a question. So sure. I've been paying attention in my role, I'm paying attention to what's happening with AI, digital transformation at large, how organizations thriving in this era. And as you know, if we look at the analyst reports, including Gartner, content is surfacing that indicates that the total cost of AI spending is surpassing the benefits. So we've got vendors that are experiencing public failures, and there also have been some investigative reports. So this morning I was reading one that suggests that OpenAI is on track to make an operational loss of about $5 billion in 2024.
Sure.
So I personally talk to my clients about service and product differentiation. But to me, it doesn't seem that organizations really, either they don't understand what competitive differentiation means, or are we just trying to, my mom used to call it, keep up with the Joneses? Seems like they're more about competitive parity. Like whatever the Joneses are doing, let's do that. But that's not differentiation. So, and like I said, my mom called it keeping up with the Joneses. I want to get your perspective on that. What do you think about what I just said there, and what's your perspective on AI? I call all that AI economics.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting that you've started off with this keeping up with the Joneses analogy, because that sort of is what we're looking at. And a lot of organizations, especially their CISOs as well as CIOs are, and maybe even CTOs are challenged and being very heavily pressured by boards to do something AI. And without really, in my observation, and I do talk to a lot of companies, I look at this problem quite a bit, not only on behalf of organizations, but, my vendor clients, without having a really firm understanding of what they're talking about. I mean, what is AI? And then we have generative AI that gets mixed into broader AI without an appreciation for how hard AI was to implement and get value out of for an enterprise, even before generative AI. And, one of the things that kind of startled me at the beginning of this new hype cycle or gold rush, and we talked earlier about gold rush, right? And how we continue to follow these and just get enamored with these gold rushes that end up not amounting to anything, is the statement by Sam Altman. I quote this quite a bit, and I might paraphrase here a little bit, that the ChatGPT at the time that it was released does a couple of things really well to give an impression of greatness. And then he goes on to say, we have a long way to go before this stuff can be reliable and trustworthy. Okay. But then just a few months later, all of a sudden, everyone's talking about how this is going to be exponential and transform everything. And of course, that got boardrooms concerned that their organizations, their businesses might fall behind or be subject to some sort of competitive threat of a first mover with generative AI. And that hasn't turned out. I mean, I honestly cannot even tell you about a vendor, okay, that has been generative AI first, that is beating everyone else at the moment, right? Because the technology, going back to really what Sam Altman was warning everybody, even up to December at Davos, this is like experimental stuff. It's R&D, research, okay? And I think, everyone, including maybe Sam Altman, I'm just assuming here, just based on what he said, is astonished by how much excitement there has been of the technology. But in terms of like adoption and the actual expression of value in a business, an end market business, forget about GPU sales and how much, AWS or Microsoft is spending on, supercomputing, AI supercomputing data center build out and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Where's the end market value, right, for organizations and users? And that is still a very, very murky and, clouded picture. And nobody still knows, it's amazing. After, more than a year, nobody knows.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be transformative, right?
Transformative. And do you think that in that you said, do you think that he is surprised by the way that AI is taking off from a consumer perspective? Do you think that that's what's going on? Is that he's surprised by the way that we're using it, or just surprised that we're finding it so exciting to use?
I think he's surprised at, I mean, based on what it's hard to tell. I can't speak for Sam Altman and how he's perceiving things, but definitely, I think everyone's surprised by the excitement. It's new. Mm-hmm. And how what we're excited about, I think is still quite open to debate. Initially why people were so excited was that this was supposed to have been the fastest ramping or adopted technology in history, faster than TikTok or blah, 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 Facebook, right? 100 million active users or users within a month or so, 100 million, right? Well, guess what? A year and a half later, OpenAI, when they introduced GPT 4.0, cited the same number, 100 million active users. We don't know how many are paying still, but no one's being transparent about that stuff. And I think, for a lot of the organizations out there, I think you have to really start to ask the question, well, this was supposed to be so transformative. Well, how come no one's being transparent about how, these massive impacts of, just reinvention and transformation that this thing is driving? But it all boils down to this: is AI is hard. It's not a mystery. And it's funny to see some of these reports by consulting firms now talking about how you have to focus on the data. I was like, well, when was data ever hard? But what's more important is you have to start looking at knowledge, right? That's a higher order of input into, it's sort of abstract, but it's a higher order input into these models, right? These large language models and what have you, a mixture of expert models. And that's really hard. And how many organizations have that in order? And if they go back and they look at the quality of their knowledge base, and that's the input or the the contributor to, let's say, a RAG or a retrieval augmented generation based application, how good's the output going to be? And then what is the totality of the total cost of ownership look like?
Exactly. So I like that you pointed out that we want to pay more attention to the knowledge. And you mentioned this earlier too, the training and the understanding of what AI really means. So the boardrooms are like, hey, we need to adopt this capability because we want to be there, right, with everybody else. And it has led to AI washing, for instance. I oftentimes talk about that. Like, why would we do that? Why would we do that? It's not really giving us the advantage. It's not even worth it. It's not worth it, right? So because the advantages are there if we use it for certain use cases. And so I think about productivity gains, maybe productivity gains to some extent, but be careful with it. And I think you see a bubble, you see a balloon, and you blow up a balloon and it's full of air.
Yeah.
Right. And then you need it to stay, because if the air doesn't stay in the balloon, it starts to sink, right? It starts to drop.
Yeah.
To me, that's what's happening with AI.
You have like the best analogies. It's awesome. I love it. You're right.
Thank you. So people and it's a hard feeling when you get let down, right? So what happens is when this happened, so the excitement was there. Remember when you were talking about the excitement? So the excitement was there and we were so excited. But what happened is then you started to not be able to trust the outcome. So when you weren't able to trust the outcomes, and the air starts coming out of the balloon, right? And so then it starts to die down and like that. So what we want organizations to do, and this is for digital transformation at large, not just for AI, but definitely for AI. Yeah. What we want to do is we want to be doing the things that will help us understand where AI is truly going to add value. So there's some productivity gains. There's some time savings. Yeah. Quality, I question, right? So I know Gartner had published some information and talked about quality in 2024, but I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think with all the monitoring that we've got to do and the double checking, it counteracts the benefits, right? So I don't think quality, but I think quantity is there. So I can use AI to go and search through massive amounts of materials that I just couldn't do before now. We can use AI for computer visioning purposes to help to identify if someone, for instance, needs to be rescued that we may not be able to see with the naked eye. We can use the computer visioning aspects of it. So I think it's good from those respects. And I think it's so important for us to understand what those good use cases are. So those are that's like productivity, time. Quality is the one that's questionable more so with generative AI than with the traditional AI. So,
But even there with the traditional stuff for the machine learning, that we've seen a lot of industries work really hard to apply in a reliable way, right? And quality is part of it. Getting to quality, getting to like what I tell a lot of folks and my clients is like, where is the enterprise grade, industrial grade, telco grade AI? And this is not new to anybody. This stuff is difficult. The data is a problem, sure. But as you start to, like what I was saying earlier, with generative AI, you're looking at higher orders of information, right? Data is like the very rudimentary. If we were really to talk about bits and bytes, starting from there, moving all the way up to, like an article or a paper, right? PowerPoint presentation with a lot of details in it. The quality of knowledge that is typically grossly missing. Most of that stuff is in people's heads, right? And that's why humans are so important, and why you, even at this phase in the evolution of generative AI and the applications that use them for whatever purpose, search or knowledge management or an assistive chatbot, we are so early in having the kind of quality data. And I think a lot of these studies that talk about, and people talking about how exponential and insane this technology is going to be, they discount how difficult it is to actually build a quality application, something that actually garners productivity versus introduces risk into your operations, which may have a massive material cost at some point or penalty for your business. We have examples of certain airlines having used these chatbot tools that are Gen AI augmented, where the thing recommends and provides an offer that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And then the company has to honor that offer, right? I mean, who do you blame? You have to blame yourself for using a tool that's not reliable. And so I'm not trying to discount the technology. There are a lot of really smart people out there that know the state of this technology, know what the roadmap looks like, know what the risks are, and can hone in on what an effective and useful application is. Unfortunately, their voices are actually pretty small. What we have right now are a lot of loud voices talking about how you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this technology without due consideration for a number of risk, limitations of the technology, and what it actually takes to build that target application that will deliver that exponential insanity of, productivity benefit, right?
Right.
Very few people are going through that cycle. There's more of that FOMO driving it, and misunderstanding, misconceptions, and delusions about what this technology can and can't do.
Right. So I would just say that I'm from the U.S. Department of Energy. And so what we did there is I just had a recent conversation. And I know while I was there, even we looked at using AI and working with the national labs, we were able to come up with some really good viable use cases for large language models and machine learning. And it's starting to evolve, and more information is coming out now on what some of those use cases are associated with climate and clean energy.
Sure,
and, inspecting the health of the transmission lines and fortifying the grid. So there are good use cases. One of the things I try to do on this show is bring out some of those use cases, the good ones, but it's just so important to also make sure that we're understanding from a sustainable transformation perspective, what are some of the risks that we should be paying attention to and managing?
Sure.
I have a question. So you talked about the enterprise adoption and some of those considerations. What about personal risks? What's your take on the personal risks and things that we should consider? Any thoughts like privacy or?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. Like for instance, one of the things that I mentioned, I think folks may know about Microsoft's recall, which was supposed to be launched with Copilot plus PC. It was delayed. indefinitely, I suppose. I don't know. I don't think they've published a date when they're actually going to release this feature for Copilot plus PC, but it was held back because of some fundamental privacy protection deficiencies, or what Debbie and I call, Debbie Reynolds, by the way, shout out to Debbie Reynolds, what we call privacy first principles of design. Lacked that, plus it had some patently disturbing security challenges in terms of the encryption of data, the data on the semantic, I think it's called the semantic index that they use, which I think is a graph database combined with a vector to profile everything that you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an individual, if you're using it for your own purposes and personal use, I think, yeah, there could be a little bit of concern. It all depends on how the vendor and all their partners actually implement these types of personalization features on device, right? But on the enterprise, I think it gets a little weird. One of the things that I think is potentially a benefit, a use case for why enterprises would use something like Recall is to capture knowledge, right?
Yeah.
It's a great thing to kind of scour through everything that you've done as an employee, and then you forfeit basically your knowledge, your know-how, plus you could, okay, I'm not saying that it's going to do a really good job of this. I think this is still really, really difficult to achieve, but enterprises could then capture institutional knowledge through functions like this. And then for an enterprise or an employee of an enterprise, what does that mean to you as a professional in terms of your skill set and your, let's say, your differentiations in the marketplace when your knowledge and your talent is codified and captured by enterprises? It opens up a big question,
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely understand why that was put on hold, and I hope it stays on hold until we get a better picture of what are the viable use cases for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to add a little bit to that.
Oh.
So that particular tool in itself, I remember when I first heard about it, I didn't have a lot of details, but when I first heard about it, I started making excuses for why they would do this, which would be to aggregate more information for the large language models, right? That's why I was like, okay, yeah, this is a tactic to start to get information that can be leveraged to augment, to make generative AI even more powerful, because there was lots of communications out that they're running out of data and real life practical data. So, but I felt like if that's the case, then why not be transparent and say, this is what we're doing? How are we making sure that this is truly beneficial to the users of this service? And then I think the real issue that everyone has that we don't have to belabor, because that was the main reason why it was pulled back, is that it was by default active. And who does that? I mean, that's such an invasion of one's privacy. So here's, exactly. It's a total invasion of our privacy. So I was in a discussion with someone not too long ago, Leonard, and we were doing some research. You're going to like this. You're going to like this.
I'm already smiling.
We were doing some we were doing some research on what are the better use cases of AI to amplify privacy, right? To protect privacy, for privacy preserving practices, et cetera. And I had, I'll say she was an intern, and I had her, I want you to go do this research. And 3 weeks into the research, she came back and says, oh my gosh, I don't think that we should use AI for preserving privacy because the tools ask you too many questions about yourself. And the minute you give it that information, you've just relinquished your privacy. And I was like, okay, let's be cool here. She was nervous. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to use, I stopped using this tool. I stopped using that tool. I'm just to the place where I want to go in a cave and just work out of a cave, So she was joking, but she was serious. And so I think what we want to do is Our privacy is so important. And now we have these tools that are getting introduced to preserve privacy. And now we have to figure out what are the right questions to ask the vendors that are making these tools available. And if they're open source as well, right? What are some of those good questions that we should be asking to ensure that our privacy is preserved? Because you can think that you have a tool that's masking information or obfuscating information. And yeah, it is. But where is it storing that original information, right? And as she dug into that, she had more and more questions than she had tools. And so we finally nailed it down to a few. It was a great exercise for people that are working with me as interns. But more so, it brought to the attention that we want to be very careful. And the reason why I brought that up is because of you mentioned the recall, right?
Yeah.
And that tool in itself. So food for thought for us as we are looking at protecting our own privacy and what things we should be doing to help ourselves in this process. All right. Any comments?
No, I think those are all good points. And I think maybe your intern had a revelation, that a lot of people haven't had, which is, oh my gosh, privacy. And then they started asking about it, right? And then maybe started to cycle through a thought process of what the implications could be of using or how certain tools could be used by the providers for certain purposes, especially if it's free. If it's free, there's going to be some data or whatever sharing, right, with an advertiser in all likelihood. And your information will likely be sold to a third party. But going back to your comment about that recall was, it was on by default, or it was opt out by default, meaning you have to opt out of it. You have to, number one, be aware of it, and then you have to, opt out of it, instead of the other way, which is you're aware of the feature and then you make this conscious decision to make that trade between and assumption of risk of that tool, right? Or that function. And then you say, okay, I'm cool with it. 9 times out of 10, I think most people just don't do it, which is what Apple kind of proved when they instituted, the tracking feature, right? There was like only 10% of people actually opted out of that protection. And so what it tells everyone is, no, we don't want to trade our privacy for your free features, or what you're calling targeted ads, or more convenient. Most people don't even care about ads. We think they're creepy because we had a conversation over here, and all of a sudden we're getting a pitch for a product that was a keyword in our conversation. I don't think that is a value to a consumer necessarily. It's definitely a value for an advertiser, right? And so we need to, I think the general public needs to understand who actually the customer is for a lot of these free services. You're not the customer. You're like, how I describe it is, you are the cow that is yet to be made into hamburger, that goes into a burger that then gets consumed by a hungry person.
Yeah.
And that hungry person is an advertiser. And, how do you like my analogy? That's pretty good.
It's pretty deep.
Yeah. But a lot of people don't know about this.
Yeah.
As much as people in our, like folks in our bubble, we preach it all the times and we assume everyone knows. This is like common sense.
I agree, because our information is being used, as you pointed out, by the advertisers, as you pointed out. And so part of sometimes what I do is I am one of those that evaluates the solutions of advertisers and make sure that they're not introducing biases. So for instance, if you're in a certain zip code, you're going to make sure that this type of product is reflected on their television, right? Or through their streaming services. But if you're in X zip code, it's a different type of product and services. So sometimes I have the luxury to work with suppliers, advertisers, and look into that and talk to them about their practices. I actually had an experience. So I knew that it started to exist once I became an AI auditor. But then I actually had this one experience that really made it hit home. And that was when I contacted my niece and we were trying to decide, I kind of wanted to do something for her. And so I started to shop around to see what I wanted to do. And the mistake I made was I put her address on my file. That's all I did. I put her address on my file. And lo and behold, I started getting all these advertisements of things that I don't buy, things I'm not interested in, all of a sudden. And so then I started to realize, so these brokers and so, I'll have to get to Heidi. Don't get me started because Heidi's one of my good friends now. But these brokers and what they're doing with our information is just not healthy. It's really not. And then AI is helping with the case, right?
But I've actually had some brokers reach out to me. They're more like junior level folks who are just curious about some of the stuff that I say, and they don't realize that they're what they're doing. They just see it as a business. Someone hired them. Hey, we're in the business of brokering information. Number one, it's legal. Whether it should be or not is totally debatable. Is it right? That's also debatable. But I think most of us are going to lean toward, no, it's not right. You shouldn't be buying information. Companies shouldn't be selling the information that we trust to them for their business to sell it to third parties. And if they do, or if they allow third parties to use our information to protect it like it's gold, is obviously not happening because we have this thing called the dark web where we could pretty much find ourselves in the dark web. And how do we think that the dark web emerged? Well, when you have all these people selling your data everywhere, it goes into a big, big nebulous pool that anyone, including bad actors, can purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And that, everyone talks about data. Oh, it's a new oil and blah, blah, blah. Well, how about this? That data is like the new oil for that is fueling the massive and fast growing cyber criminal economy, which Microsoft now continually points out. That is, they estimate, I don't know who estimated this, but the estimation is it's the third largest economy in the world.
It's a shame.
And then it's the fastest.
It's a crying shame.
It's growing very fast, faster than any economy, probably any industry. And it's the cyber criminal industry. So there you go.
Yeah.
Consequences, right? I mean, yeah, there you go.
I mean, we could really go down that path because there's just so much in that space. So I won't, but I mean, there's just so much, right? Phishing hasn't been amplified. All these different types of threats have been amplified. I will say that I always encourage people to take a really close look at the life cycle, at the AI life cycle, at the project life cycle, right? Take a look at every single angle and understand that even if it's discovery, it could be a threat, it could be a attack surface. So I do tell my clients that. So here's
good advice.
Yeah. And in my classes, we actually go through the life cycle and we identify like where are those points of attack, right? Potential points of attack. So here's my last question for you. So this has been good.
Not the last question.
Okay. Well, next to last. So
okay, go ahead.
I was talking to a guest not too long ago, and the question that I asked him is, what's a sure way to excel at digital transformation? And what's a sure way to sabotage it? And one of the things that he said while you were thinking about this, one of the things that he pointed out for sabotage is that we forget about the people. So we think about technology when it comes to digital transformation, but we don't think about the workforce and the people. And if you want a sure way to sabotage your digital transformation programs, you just forget about the workforce, right? So I just want to get your perspective on that. Like, what's your perspective on sure ways to excel at digital transformation? It could be AI transformation.
Yeah.
And what's your thinking around a sure way to sabotage?
Yeah, I would say it all boils down to the risk of change. Digital transformation is about change. And whenever there's change, there's risk, right? And there's always this play between benefit and risk. And unfortunately, risk takes on two roles. It's number one, inherent in change. And then number two, there's a risk of the actual technology enablement delivering on the target capability realization. And that oftentimes is off. And, this is not coming from an analyst who has never been in the trenches. I've been in big trenches throughout my consulting career. So I can tell you, it doesn't matter what technology it is. I've been through generations of technologies, implementing them, designing them, program managing them, and managing change management for large transformation programs. That is one of the biggest challenges. Oftentimes, yes, it is the technology enablement that falls short, almost always.
And is it because of the overemphasis on the technology, or losing sight of what the mission is of the organization, or just getting too focused on the technology perspectives?
No, it's what we deal with now in markets is inflated expectations, having aspirations for a particular technology that don't match reality. And that's why oftentimes you see projects have cost runovers, and there's a lot of things that get in the way because of mismanaged expectations. And that impacts people. I think the consideration of people, it's germane. People, process, technology. We hear, everyone knows this. I don't know why we're still talking about this stuff. It should be, okay, all right, enough. Get it. No, let's talk about real problems. Why do projects fail? Why do technologies get implemented in a way that don't deliver the promise? And I guess now that I've ranted a little bit, my answer to you is we don't ask tough enough questions, and we just believe in technology. We believe these folks who just come in and have this great story and a PowerPoint about digital transformation, what you should do. And, you need to take care of your data like it's a simple thing, right. Oversimplifying, overdoing all these things that actually build and create risk into a digital transformation program.
Right. No, that's what you've been saying throughout the whole talk. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's what you've been saying, to focus on the risk.
That's you. This is what you do to me, Pamela. This is like, I'm going to blame it on you.
And remember the balloon and the air?
Oh, yeah. Can I borrow that?
You can borrow that. You can borrow that because what happens when the air comes out? When the air seeps out, it sinks, and you're so disappointed. So disappointed. So great. So then now I'm to my last question. Okay. Tell me, usually I ask the guests to share words of wisdom for those that are listening, or just advice, right? Usually the advice is words of wisdom, but I'll let you be creative here. But please give us some insights, some words of wisdom or advice that we can take with us, including me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you know everything, so it's hard to give you any kind of advice. But for most folks out there, what I would say is don't believe the hype. Do your homework. Ask a lot of tough questions is what do your homework means. And you'll save yourself a lot of headache.
Okay. No, that's good. And that pretty much sums it up. So I really want to thank you. That's great. That's great. And very succinct. So I really want to thank you for being on AI or Not. I think it's been a really good discussion. I'm so glad that we met. And so thank you so much for everything.